I was thinking about how small my world had become, how carefully I moved inside it, how tired I was of constantly adjusting myself to fit into someone else's version of reality. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the laundry forgotten beside me, and let the tears fall quietly. Not because of one big thing, but because of all the small things that had been adding up for years. In that moment, I didn't have answers. I didn't know what this meant for my marriage. I didn't know if things could change. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. All I knew was this. The exhaustion I felt wasn't just physical, it was emotional. It was the kind of tired that comes from constantly doubting yourself, from shrinking your feelings, from trying to survive inside a relationship that slowly teaches you to disappear. And even though that realization scared me, it also brought a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't asking, what's wrong with me? I was asking, why do I feel this way when I'm here? That question stayed with me, quiet, persistent. And deep down, I knew it wasn't going to let me go. After that afternoon, I started noticing how often I ignored my own voice. Not the voice in my head, but the one deeper than that. The one that reacts before words exist. The one that tightens my chest or makes my stomach drop when something feels wrong. For years, I had trained myself not to listen to it. Whenever that feeling appeared, I immediately searched for explanations that didn't involve him. I blamed stress. I blamed my age. I blamed the fact that we got married young before I really knew who I was. I told myself that relationships were supposed to be hard, that love meant compromise, that maybe this quiet discomfort was just adulthood settling in. But now I wasn't so sure. I began remembering moments I had filed away as insignificant. Conversations where I had walked away feeling confused but couldn't explain why. Jokes that didn't feel like jokes, but I laughed anyway. Decisions that somehow always ended up being his, even when we called them ours. None of it had seemed serious on its own, but together it painted a picture I wasn't ready to look at before. I realized I was constantly monitoring my tone, my expressions, my timing. If I spoke too calmly, he said I was cold. If I spoke emotionally, he said I was irrational. If I stayed quiet, he said I was distant. There was no right way to exist. And slowly, I had started to believe that the problem was my inability to get it right. One evening, we were sitting on the couch, watching something neither of us was really paying attention to. He was scrolling on his phone. I was staring at the TV, not absorbing a single word. I felt the urge to speak, just something small, something honest. I feel really tired lately, I said. He didn't look up. Tired how? He asked, his voice flat. I paused. That familiar hesitation returned. I searched for the safest version of the truth. Emotionally, I said softly. That's when he finally looked at me and smiled. Not a kind smile, not a concerned one. The kind that makes you feel like you just said something foolish. You're always tired, he said. Everyone's tired. You think you're special? The words weren't shouted. They weren't cruel on the surface. But something inside me cracked. I nodded. I even smiled back out of habit. But inside, I felt myself pulling away. Just a little. Like my heart took a step back to protect itself. That night, lying in bed, I didn't cry. I just stared into the darkness and let myself feel something I had avoided for years. Anger. Not explosive anger, not dramatic anger. A quiet, steady anger that came from realizing I had been minimizing my own pain to keep the peace. I thought about how often I had comforted him when he was stressed, how carefully I listened to his frustrations, how seriously I took his emotions. And then I thought about how rarely mine were treated with the same care. I wasn't asking for perfection, I was asking to be acknowledged. That realization scared me more than the sadness ever had, because sadness could be explained away. But anger meant boundaries, and boundaries meant change. The next day, I went about my routine like usual, work, errands, chores, but everything felt slightly different. I noticed how heavy my body felt when I walked through the door, How relieved I felt when I was alone. How tense I became when I heard his keys. It was subtle, but it was real. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder what my life would feel like if I didn't have to constantly explain myself. If my emotions didn't need approval to exist. I didn't have answers. I still loved him. Or at least, I loved who I believed he was. I loved the version of us I kept hoping we'd return to. But alongside that love, something else was growing. Awareness. And once it starts, it's hard to stop. I didn't say anything yet. I wasn't ready. But inside me, a quiet decision was forming. I was going to start paying attention to myself again, even if I didn't know where that would lead. Sometimes he tells me I'm lucky, that no one else would be as patient with me as he is, that I'd be lost without him. He says it calmly, almost gently. And somehow that makes it worse. Because when someone raises their voice, you know it's wrong. When someone stays calm while slowly shrinking you, it's harder to see. I feel emotionally drained most of the time. Like I'm always on edge, waiting for the next moment where I'll be told I misunderstood, misremembered, misjudged. Waiting to be corrected, adjusted, put back into place. There are days when I come home and sit in my car for a few extra minutes before going inside. Not because I don't love my home, but because I need a moment where no one is watching me. No one is evaluating my words or my tone or my reactions. Just a moment to breathe without feeling wrong. I've started to notice how small my world has become. How much I've pulled inward. I don't share things the way I used to. I don't tell stories with the same excitement. I edit myself constantly, even around people who love me. And that editing, it's exhausting. I'm tired of explaining myself. I'm tired of defending my feelings. I'm tired of wondering if I'm the problem. I don't even know when I stop trusting my own voice. I just know that some days it feels like it's barely there. And that's why I'm here. Because saying this out loud, even shakily, feels like the first honest thing I've done in a long time. After a while, I stopped noticing when the tension became part of my routine. It blended into my days so quietly that I barely questioned it anymore. It was just how things were. I wake up before him most mornings. I move carefully around the apartment, almost silently. Not because he ever asked me to be quiet, but because I learned that my presence could feel intrusive if I wasn't careful. The sound of cabinets closing too loudly. The wrong tone in a simple, "good morning." Small things that somehow carried weight. I check my phone before getting out of bed. Not for messages from friends, but to see if he texted me already. If he hasn't, I wonder why. If he has, I reread his words, trying to interpret the mood behind them. Neutral messages feel cold. Short replies feel like disapproval. And my chest tightens before the day even starts. When I get dressed, I sometimes change outfits more than once. I ask myself if what I'm wearing will cause a comment, if it's too much or not enough, if it sends the wrong message. Somewhere along the way, choosing clothes stopped being about me. He doesn't tell me what to wear, not directly. He just makes observations. That's interesting. You're going out like that? People might get the wrong idea. And suddenly, my reflection feels like a problem I need to solve. Conversations have a pattern now. I've learned it well. If I express frustration, it turns into a debate about my tone. If I say I'm hurt, it becomes a discussion about intent. If I try to explain how something made me feel, I'm told I'm exaggerating or remembering it wrong. Eventually, I stop mid-sentence. There's a kind of control that doesn't involve rules or ultimatums. It's quieter than that. It lives in the way you start censoring yourself, in the way you anticipate reactions before they happen, in the way you slowly shrink your needs so the relationship feels more manageable. I didn't notice it at first. I thought I was becoming more understanding, more flexible, more mature. That's what I told myself when I stopped bringing things up, when I let comments slide, when I swallowed discomfort because it seemed easier than explaining it. But the cost of that silence started to show. I feel it in my body, the constant tension in my shoulders, the headaches that come out of nowhere, The way my stomach tightens before conversations that should be simple. I feel tired even after sleeping. I feel drained even on calm days. Sometimes when I try to talk about how exhausted I feel, he tells me I'm imagining it, that everyone feels tired, that I make things bigger than they are. And the worst part is, sometimes I believe him. I start doubting my reactions. I ask myself if I'm too emotional, too needy, too dramatic. I replay conversations again and again, searching for proof that I didn't misunderstand them. That's when the gaslighting really takes hold. When you stop asking what happened and start asking what's wrong with me. I still remember the first time I caught myself apologizing for crying. Not because he asked me to, but because I felt embarrassed for having feelings in the first place. "I'm sorry," I said. He looked confused. For what? For being emotional. He didn't argue. He didn't correct me. He just nodded slightly, like the apology made sense. That moment stayed with me. My world has become smaller in ways I didn't expect. I hesitate before calling friends. I don't share details about my marriage. Not because I'm protecting him, but because I'm afraid of hearing. My name is something I still hesitate to say out loud in rooms like this. Not because I don't know who I am, but because for a long time, I was taught to doubt myself. I'm 28 years old. I live in the United States. I'm married, and I got married young. When people hear that part, they usually smile. They say things like, "That's beautiful," or "You found love early." I usually smile back. It's a habit. Smiling has always been easier than explaining, but what I want to talk about today isn't beautiful. It's quiet. It's confusing. And it's exhausting in ways that don't leave visible marks. I've been feeling tired for a long time. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. Not the kind that goes away after a weekend or a vacation. It's a deeper kind of exhaustion. The kind that settles into your chest and makes every thought feel heavier than it should. Some mornings, I wake up already bracing myself. Not for something specific, just for the day, for the conversations, for the looks, for the tone of voice that tells me I've already done something wrong, even if I don't know what yet. I married my husband when I was still learning who I was. I was young, hopeful, convinced that love meant commitment no matter what. I thought growing together meant staying, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. Back then, I thought feeling chosen was the same as feeling loved. At first, everything felt intense. He was attentive, protective, involved in every decision I made. I remember thinking, he cares so much. I remember mistaking control for concern and jealousy for passion. It didn't change overnight. That's the part people don't understand. It never does. It was subtle. Small comments, little corrections, questions that sounded harmless, but somehow left me second-guessing myself. Are you sure that's what happened? I don't remember it that way. You're being too sensitive. You always overreact. I started hearing those phrases more often than my own thoughts. I still go to work. I still talk to friends. From the outside, my life looks normal, functional, stable. But inside my head, there's a constant noise, like I'm always defending myself in a conversation that never ends. I replay things he says, trying to figure out what I did wrong. I rewrite entire arguments in my mind, wondering if I imagined the tone, the look, the dismissal. And eventually, I stopped trusting my own memory. That's when the exhaustion really started. Because it's one thing to be tired from doing too much. It's another thing to be tired from constantly questioning your reality. I used to be decisive, confident. I knew what I liked, what I wanted, what I believed. Now I hesitate before answering simple questions. I ask for reassurance about things I used to be sure of. I apologize automatically, even when I don't know what I'm apologizing for.